When you start with a company, what common financial control weaknesses do you typically find, especially in early stage companies that you work with?
It really depends on what stage the company is in, but if we say that it's an early stage and that it's a deep tech company, usually there are lots of gaps in their accounting and reporting process and structure overall. There is usually no financial operating system, so there's no actual reporting and tracking of accounting statements, management reporting, KPIs. Basically, it lacks structure and reporting cadence. Also, there's maybe some initial budgeting and financial planning, but it's quite simple and not as advanced and as complex as maybe the company actually needs and requires. There's also not a clear idea of what the real runway is, what the actual cash burn is on a monthly basis, and how how much money is required for the deep tech company to get to the next milestone, right? Also, we see that not the right KPIs are tracked. It's maybe a founder that has used to be working in another industry or follows a typical SaaS trajectory. But when it comes to deep tech companies, they need to be tracking the specific KPIs. And we see that not being the case in most of the early stage deep tech companies. And also, they don't plan for different scenarios. That's what we have observed. They maybe plan for the most optimistic scenario when they receive the money. Everything goes smoothly as planned. But as we know, this doesn't happen 100% of the times, and you need to be aware and you need to proactively think about what can go wrong, plan plan for it, budget for it, and in those cases have some contingency plan. So I would say these are the common weaknesses that we see with early stage companies.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to a new interview here on startup.ro. I'm Juana, and I have the pleasure of having with me today part of the team of CFO Insights. They offer fractional CFO services, and we're going to find out more about their services. What does that mean? I have a pleasure of having here with me today Diana Alaznova. She's the CEO and founder of CFO Insights, alongside Angela Tanasov, finance manager, and Ivan Minev, financial analyst. Thank you all for being here with us today.
Thank
It's
you for
our
having
pleasure.
us.
So, CFO Insights offers fractional CFO services. What does that mean exactly? And for small or early stage startups, what does this engagement typically look like? How do you deal with their needs? How do you address them?
Okay,
Sure.
I'll start here. So basically, every dynamic company which operates in a fast-growing industry with unpredictability requires C-level financial expertise in order to structure better its strategy, its financial and business modeling, its pricing. And this is the highest level of finance. It is usually available only for bigger companies who have the need and volume for full-time CFOs. So what we wanted to do is basically democratize this access and give it to smaller startups and scale-ups who are basically responsible for the vast number of innovations in our ecosystem, and give them the proper tools to operate towards sustainable financial models and towards higher success rate for their fundraisings.
Depending on the startup's maturity, how do you decide which financial functions do you cover fractionally? I mean, I don't know, do you do the forecasting, or do you help them with the reporting, or managing a cash flow? How do you decide what services to offer, or is it in terms of what they need at a specific point in time?
Yeah, maybe I can add to that. It
Please.
really depends on the company and what their actual needs are. For example, a company that's pre-seed or seed and is in a fundraising process has different needs than, for example, a Series A company that already has the financing but now looks to actually develop and structure its financial process. Maybe just to add, in terms of our services, if I can separate them, it's on the one hand project-based services, consulting services, which are related to fundraising, in terms of helping founders with preparing their business model, financial model, pitch decks, investment memorandums, and all the data that's required during that process. Alternatively, it could be that we help founders in an M&A scenario, maybe grant application for EIC or something else. So there's a clear engagement there. And on the second hand, we actually work long term with monthly engagement with other companies, and we become their outsourced CFO for the long term, where we actually onboard the company, we analyze their actual performance so far, we structure a monthly cadence with creating a financial plan that we then track on a monthly basis, could be a quarterly basis, it depends on the company. And we are basically their strategic finance partner for the long term.
Um, do you also when they're preparing for a fundraising round, how do you help them also present the financial risks and technology risks to the investors, because you already have a picture of what's going on there in their company, I'm guessing?
Yeah, well, it really depends on what type of risks we're talking about, but generally speaking, deep tech fundraising is, I guess, fundamentally about de-risking a company. So, for example, initially there could be the prototype risk where we need to showcase that the technical risk has been overcome. Maybe that's followed by the early customer interest risk. So we need to show that the company has some initial traction. There could be the product market fit risk, whether the company has actually found the ideal client profile and is selling to the right customers. Then obviously there's the commercialization and the scaling up risk, right? So at each stage, we work with the companies to show investors and broadly to anyone that they're speaking with how they are de-risking at their current stage, so that when an investor, for example, decides to invest in that company, he is aware that, for example, the product is already built, so the technical risk has already been solved.
You offer a broad range of services, and you're doing also modeling and forecasting and budgeting. um, how do you build these kind of models for companies that don't have product market traction yet? How do you help them in this case to present also some relevant information for investors, because investors also always ask you about what are your plans, how do you budget, how do you see the traction in the following years? How do you help them with this? How do you build their models?
Yeah, I can chime in on that.
Please, Anna.
We start with what we know for certain, which most of the time is costs. You can't predict revenue accurately when there's no product market fit yet, but you definitely know what you're spending. We focus on building a detailed cost structure for the income statement and a detailed cash flow statement. Once we have those two, we can calculate runway, which is basically how much time does the founder have before his money runs out and he can't prove that his product is actually revolutionary. And I think that's the essential part for deciding where to allocate time and resources.
Mhm. And speaking about investors, what's the biggest, I don't know, let's say misconception they still have about deep tech, and how this affects the way in which startups get financed from what you've seen, or what the founders have told you so far?
Well, maybe I can say that from my experience, investors are really still thinking that deep tech companies are similar to SaaS companies, typical SaaS companies, where the iteration process is fast. They ship a product each week and they start monetizing their user base relatively soon. But in reality, deep tech is quite different. The initial development of the thesis, the actual product, uh, getting the certificates, the regulatory approvals. These things take time. It could be several months, a couple of years before actually getting to the monetization aspect, which is quite different than other use cases. So this is definitely one area that we still see some misconceptions when it comes to investor expectations.
Um, I was looking over the website and some studies that you have there, and I saw that at some point you say that the traditional, let's say, garage startup, then to VC, then to scale model, doesn't really work or fit the deep tech world. What's specific financial milestone matters for, let's say, lab-based founders, that VC world still doesn't measure? And I don't know, what's the biggest mistake you see founders make when mixing funding with grants, also with equity?
Yeah, to expand on what Angel said, the traditional SaaS way of startup to VC to scale just doesn't work for deep tech, and it shows in what we measure. For lab-based founders, the important milestones are different. For example, we measure TRL, which technology readiness level. We look
Mhm.
at unit economics at prototype scale, not just theoretical production numbers. Bill of material stability over iterations, show engineering maturity, yield improvements per cycle. Manufacturing readiness and procurement readiness matter a lot because those could be a big problems in the future. Certification risks we've seen in the past can make or break your timeline. Uh, Conversion rates, cost of validation, capital spending per milestone, all of those are metrics which matter a lot more for lab-based founders than for the traditional startup, a SaaS startup.
Let's make an exercise, or a practical exercise. If, let's say, a deep tech founder came to you with a breakthrough technology but with zero commercialization timeline, doesn't know how to do and what to do when, what's the first financial model that you would build for such a founder? What would you do for him first?
Well, we need to definitely stick to the actual roadmap in terms of forecasting the spend required to reach the milestone, which could be, for example, having a viable prototype. We really need to map and align the roadmap into the budget. So that includes things like projecting the right headcount. Do we actually have the talent in house needed to create this prototype? Do we need to budget maybe hardware components enough where we don't miss key components, and materials required for that prototype. And also we need to definitely budget the delay between actual costs when they occur and when the payment actually happens. For example, with large capex payments, in particular with deep tech companies, the prepayment for those happen 2-3 months before delivery. So we need to account for that because that's a huge cash outflow, maybe 2-3 months before actually occurring that cost. So these are the things that we look for. We make sure that the money that's received and it's currently available would actually um, be sufficient until we reach the milestone. We look at cash burn and runway in particular based on achieving that milestone. So the runway is milestone based, right? It's not monthly based and not entirely based on historicals because maybe we can look at how much we've spent so far, but then in the budget we actually know that 2 months from now we need to make, let's say, 30% down payment on a large capex investment that we need to make, which would definitely skew the cash burn numbers and the runway as well.
You are speaking now about money and the importance of money not running out. Another example, another practical example that I want to ask you to offer us: how should a founder design a financial plan for a technology that, I don't know, might hit a wall at some point along the roadmap, or jump ahead, or, I don't know, take 1 year longer than planned? Some pointers. What should he focus on to take into consideration these kinds of events?
Right. Well, definitely include scenario analysis and having dynamic financial forecasts. For example, you can have your base scenario, main scenario, whether you call it realistic or whatever. So that's what you strive for and that's what you expect. However, prepare a second scenario where key assumptions are stress test. For example, maybe we hire the right person, but our budgeted salary was not 5,000 euros, let's say, but it was 6,000 because the person that we found was actually more senior, more experienced. We really liked that hire and we decided to hire that person. However, it would cost more. So we need to make a different scenarios with a few key changes, or maybe a bit delays in terms of the actual prototype or getting to the MVP. So these things need to be considered, stress tests, inputted in another case where this is observed on a monthly and maybe sometimes even on a weekly basis, so that once we see that we start to deviate from the main scenario, we start thinking about the second scenario, right? So maybe we are getting some delays. The runway is actually 2 months lower than we expected initially. We now need to proactively start thinking about bridge round, maybe some grants that we can apply for, maybe some angel investments that we can receive. We need to start thinking about how to get those 2 months in addition because we need to get to the MVP, right?
And building a bit on what you said so far, again, talking about investors and the way they look at founders and their startups, especially when they're just starting. What are some wrong ways, let's say, in which investors typically try to value pre-revenue startups in deep tech? And what would be a right way, again, from your experience working with founders and from constructing some financial models for them?
Well, yeah, the wrong way is definitely using traditional revenue multiples for companies with no revenue yet. Deep tech companies take a lot more to reach that point. So that would definitely be the biggest mistake an investor can do. The right way would be use milestone-based valuation, as we already talked about, technology readiness levels. And the key here is discount rate because it reflects risk. If you have a working prototype, your risk is lower, so the discount is lower. If you're still on early concept stage, well, then the discount will be higher. We also look at things like IP strength, cost to reproduce, engineering risks. We evaluate the path to getting customers and any commercial applications that could work in multiple markets, because those would add value as well. And we need to consider strategic value to large companies or governments, because that's often where the real validation comes from in deep tech. It's about adjusting for risk properly, not trying to recreate revenue projections that don't exist yet.
Yeah, and maybe just to add on that,
Yes.
it really is important to look at the cap table and the actual structure of a potential deal. Evaluation could make sense or it could not. So, for example, it really depends on what founders expect in terms of absolute amount of investment that they want to receive, and at what valuation. Because maybe some founders are too optimistic in their desire to grow faster, where they don't have the ability to absorb as large of an investment as they could actually. And on the other side, investors need to consider, for example, what's the remaining percentage of the founders. You don't really want to dilute the founders too much, especially in the early rounds. Dilution is a key component, and as a founder, you really need to have your incentives right, because obviously in the early stage, founders are not compensated as much for their current experience based on salary, but more so about potential of the company, what it could be worth one day.
I'm curious. What's the response you've gotten so far from people in venture capital? I don't know. What have the founders you work with conveyed after they went to a venture capital fund and presented these scenarios and try to explain to them that this is the correct way or it's a better way to do and to evaluate and to do their strategy. I'm curious what was their response. I mean, do they understand that there are different things and they also need to adapt their questions, their expectations, their time, their patience, their time. I don't know how to put it. I'm curious what's the reaction, and also what's the reaction of the founders when you're putting on the table different scenarios for them that are useful for their business and for their future development in the end.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. In reality, the fundraising process is quite the challenge for both founders and investors, and it's all about matching and aligning expectations. That's why when we talk about fundraising with founders, we really stress the need to really research and find the right investor for you, for this company, for this industry, for this stage of development. For example, there are VCs that are agnostic. They invest in many different businesses in different industries, but there are some strategic VCs that only invest in particular verticals, right? So maybe you need to focus on those type of investors that really understand your business and your trajectory, because otherwise you can explain your situation, you can present your challenges, what you deal on a daily basis, but then maybe on the other side there's an investor that really cannot relate to that. He's used to other type of companies, and that's fine. He's just not the right investor for you.
It's not a match for you.
Exactly.
What's next for you in 2026? What's next for CFO Insights? What are your plans? Also developing your startup as well as helping other founders. Tell us a bit on what's your strategy for next year.
Well, we are expanding both geographically in terms of additional markets that we are penetrating, and also in terms of industries that we are specializing in. This is one of the reasons why our team issued the 3 playbooks. These are very useful documents, CFO playbooks, which are very specified for each particular industry, like AI and deep tech, or clean tech, or defense and cybersecurity. And they outline all the challenges a potential startup may experience in terms of fundraising, pricing, business modeling, as well as potential solutions that we can offer. So basically 2026 should bring the fruits out of this work, but our general approach is to never stop growing and never stop learning.
Do you also have startups that you're working with here in Romania too, or
Yes, we do. We have startups in Romania, in the UK, France, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Greece, the Netherlands, and more.
Is it difficult? I don't know how to rephrase it. How is it to do a playbook or to do a strategy for a Romanian startup and for one, let's say you mentioned UK, and the one from the UK, taking into consideration also the economical background here and everything that's changing? Is it more difficult? Is it the same?
Well, I would say it's the same, because each company that has to do a really difficult innovation in a dynamic sector experiences similar challenges, regardless of where they're based locally, because most often these businesses are not local, but they are regional. And I would say the big difference comes if you compare Europe and the US, rather than if we compare different European countries, because in the US we have much higher liquidity, and usually what we need to do here in Europe is build the same but much more efficient in terms of capital allocations, and they do it. Like the startups here actually prove it's possible.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Diana. My last question for you, and I'm going to ask each of you to provide us with an answer to have a lot more information. If you had to write, let's say, a new golden rule for financial leadership for deep tech founders, what would it be? I don't know, one sentence every founder just beginning in deep tech should have above his desk, his or her desk.
Maybe I can start, and it's quite simple, but just
Please.
don't run out of cash. That's the first and most important rule for startups.
A very good rule. Thank you.
Yeah, I can leave Diana for last, but I would build on what Atana said, and I would say that yeah, financial discipline is very important. It's not just a back office function, it's survival, and that's tied to the not running out of cash.
Cool. Thank you very much, Diana.
Yeah, mine would be startups need to continue building the science, but think about financing the journey for this, because they don't not only need to perfect the technology alone, they need to structure the capital path to reach that milestone they are aiming for.
Well, again, a very good point. Prepare for a journey. Thank you very much, Diana. Thank you very much, Angel. Thank you very much, Ivan. Thank you all for being here with us today. Guys, if you have startups, if you're just starting and you don't have the money or whatever, how you're building your business, but you definitely need someone to help you with financial planning, so you don't run out of money next month. Hire a fractional CFO, talk to the guys from CFO Insights, listen to what they have to say, and be prepared. Also be prepared when talking to investors, and bring them a few models that they can choose from. Thank you guys once again, and best of luck next year too. Thank you for watching, and as usual, we see each other every day on startup.ro, on our Facebook and LinkedIn page, and also on our YouTube channels. Thank you guys once again.